The sun had barely finished rising when a cloud of dust along the dirt road announced the arrival of a man nobody was expecting. He came on foot, dragging his tired boots through the dry earth, a worn-out bundle tied across his back, and a hat so old it had long since lost its original color. To anyone watching from the fence posts of the Santa Helena Ranch, the largest and most respected horse breeding property in the entire region, he was just another stranger passing through, just another face, just another pair of tired eyes. But that man, without anyone knowing it yet, was about to turn the history of that place completely upside down. The Santa Helena Ranch was famous throughout the state for one reason above all others. It was home to the most expensive horse in the entire region. A stallion with a coat of shining black, deep as midnight, smooth as still water, whose name was Emperor. Nobody knew exactly what that animal was worth, but the rumor was that his price alone exceeded the value of every acre of land surrounding him. Emperor was fast as the wind, strong as a bull, and above all, he was wild. Not one ranch hand on the property had managed to get close to him without walking away with a bruise, a scare, or both. The horse bit, kicked, reared up without warning, and in less than 6 months he had already thrown 3 different stable hands to the ground. It was into this tense and restless world that the old stranger appeared at the front gate of the ranch, asking, in a voice low and heavy with exhaustion, for nothing more than a chance to work. He wasn't asking for money up front. He wasn't asking for a comfortable bed or a fine meal. He simply asked to work, to do anything, in exchange for a plate of food and a roof over his head at night. The ranch foreman, a stocky, middle-aged man named Vargas, looked the old man up and down slowly and made no effort to hide the smirk spreading across his face. "Look here, old man, this isn't a retirement home. We need people who can take the hard work, young people, strong people. You must be pushing 70. You probably can't even lift a bucket of feed, let alone handle wild horses or cattle." The other ranch hands, who were nearby adjusting saddles and reins, broke into laughter. One of the younger ones, bold and loud, shouted from across the yard, "Hey, Grandpa, you want a walking stick to help you get back down the road? This ain't no place for pensioners." The laughter spread through the group, bouncing off the wooden fence posts and echoing across the open yard. The old man didn't respond to the provocation. He simply lowered his head, adjusted the bundle on his back, and remained where he stood, waiting. There was something in his posture, a stillness that didn't match what you'd expect from someone being humiliated. He didn't look ashamed, he looked patient. And patience, in a man that old, can sometimes look like something much deeper than simple endurance. It was at that moment that the owner of the ranch, Mr. Augusto, stepped out of the main house to see what all the noise was about. He was a man of wealth and commanding presence, dressed in impeccable clothes even on an ordinary workday. He approached with both hands resting on his hips, scanning the crowd. "What's going on out here? Why all this commotion so early in the morning?" Vargas hurried to explain, still grinning. "This old fellow showed up at the gate asking for work, Mr. Augusto. I already told him we don't have anything for someone like him, but he won't move along." Mr. Augusto studied the old man with curiosity, perhaps even a little amusement. "And what do you know how to do, my friend? Have you ever worked with horses? With cattle?" The old man raised his eyes for the first time, and there was something in them, a strange, ancient light, like a man who carries stories inside him that the world has long since forgotten how to tell. "I've worked with horses my whole life, sir. It's the only thing I truly know how to do." One of the younger ranch hands, still riding the wave of his earlier joke, leaned forward and called out, "Well then, why don't you go ahead and take care of Emperor, Grandpa? Maybe he can teach you a thing or two about speed, since you probably can't even run fast enough to get out of a snake's way." The laughter erupted again, louder this time. But Mr. Augusto, seeing an opportunity, perhaps for entertainment, perhaps for a test disguised as cruelty, stretched his arm toward the most isolated corral on the property and said, "Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's see if this man really knows anything about horses. If he can just get close to Emperor without being thrown to the ground, I'll personally give him a plate of food and let him sleep in the barn tonight. And if he manages to do more than that, well, then we'll talk about a job. And before we find out what happened next, before we discover what that old man was truly capable of, let me take just a moment to ask you something. If you're watching this story and feeling that pull in your chest, that feeling that something special is about to happen, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. Because what this old man is about to do next is going to leave every single person on that ranch completely speechless. And I promise you, this story is only just getting started. The entire group followed the old man to the isolated corral, surrounded by tall, reinforced wooden walls. Inside, Emperor was already pacing back and forth, agitated, his heavy hooves pounding the ground with force, as if he had sensed the presence of strangers before he even laid eyes on them. The animal was simply magnificent, black coat catching the morning sun like polished obsidian, muscles rolling under smooth skin, dark mane rippling with each sudden shake of his powerful head. The ranch hands climbed up and leaned over the fence rail, ready to watch what they fully expected to be a short and embarrassing show. Vargas crossed his arms and settled in with a satisfied grin. This will be over fast. He won't last 2 minutes. The old man, however, didn't appear to be in any hurry. He approached the corral gate with steps that were slow and deliberate, almost ceremonious, like someone approaching sacred ground rather than a simple farm enclosure. He removed his faded hat from his head and hung it on a nearby post. He breathed in deeply, slow and steady, and stood still for a long moment, simply looking at the horse through the fence. Not studying him like a problem to be solved. Looking at him the way you look at someone you haven't seen in a very long time. Then, in a voice so quiet that the wind nearly stole it away entirely, the old man spoke a single word. Thunder. What happened next stopped every person in that yard cold. Emperor, the horse that had been pacing and snorting and slamming his hooves against the ground just moments before, stopped. Just like that, completely. The ears went up, sharp and alert. The great dark head swung around toward the old man with a speed and precision that made several ranch hands flinch backward on instinct. For one long second, nobody breathed. And then, before the eyes of a disbelieving Vargas, a stunned crowd of ranch hands, and a speechless Mr. Augusto, the most expensive and most dangerous horse in the entire region, began to move. Not charging, not rearing, not striking out in fury. He came forward at a trot, then a smooth canter, crossing the corral in a fluid, purposeful line, heading directly toward the old man with the confidence of an animal returning to someone it had been searching for across a long, long distance. The horse stopped directly in front of the old man, dropped his massive head, and pressed his nose gently against the man's chest. It was a gesture of such complete and unmistakable trust, so tender, so human in its quiet intimacy, that for a moment nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the fence boards. Vargas stood with his mouth hanging open. The young ranch hands who had been laughing just minutes before were now staring in total silence, unable to explain what they were witnessing. The old man raised a trembling hand and laid it against the horse's forehead, stroking him slowly, softly. And it looked to everyone watching as if time itself had simply decided to stop. Mr. Augusto was the first to find his voice, but this time there was no trace of laughter in it. How is this possible? That horse has never let anyone get close to him like that. He bit 3 men this year alone. Who are you? The old man kept his hand moving gently along the horse's neck, his eyes bright with something that looked like a mixture of deep grief and immense relief. My name is Joaquim, sir. And this horse, I first held in my hands when he was just a few days old, when he could barely stand on his own legs. His mother died giving birth to him on a ranch about 2 leagues from here, and it was me who took care of him day and night. I fed him from a bottle. I slept in the stable so he wouldn't feel the cold. I was the first living creature he ever truly trusted, and I'm the one who gave him the name Thunder, because even as a foal, he had that habit of pounding his hoof against the ground when he got restless, like distant thunder rolling in before a storm. Mr. Augusto's brow furrowed. "But this horse is named Emperor. I bought him 4 years ago from a reputable auctioneer with full documentation and certified bloodline papers." The old man allowed himself a small, sad smile. "Names can change, sir. But what gets written on an animal's heart doesn't. I worked on that ranch for 15 years. I raised this horse with my own hands from his very first breath. I trained him from his first steps. I taught him to trust people again after he lost his mother. And then, 4 years ago, I lost everything. My wife fell ill. I spent every last cent I had trying to save her. When she passed, I had nothing left. No job, no home, no reason to keep going. The ranch owner sold off much of the herd to cover debts. Thunder was among the horses that went. I never found out where he'd gone. I've been moving from place to place ever since, doing odd jobs when I could find them, walking when I couldn't, until I stopped keeping track of where my legs were taking me." The words settled over the yard like the quiet after a long rain. Vargas, who minutes before had ridiculed this man without hesitation, was now staring at the ground with something heavy on his face. The young ranch hands glanced at each other, the weight of what they'd said and done beginning to settle in. Mr. Augusto stepped forward slowly, watching the connection between the old man and the horse with a kind of reverence that surprised even himself. "You're telling me you raised Emperor Thunder from the day he was born?" "Yes, sir. And looking at him now, I can see that no matter how well you may have cared for him these past years, and I don't doubt that you have, he never forgot who was the first person to look him in the eyes and promise to take care of him. Horses have longer memories than most people give them credit for. They don't forget kindness, and they don't forget pain either." That sentence seemed to reach somewhere inside Mr. Augusto that he hadn't expected to be touched. He stood quietly for a moment, looking at the horse, then at the man, then at the row of ranch hands along the fence. He made his decision without any visible deliberation. "Vargas, prepare a proper room for Mr. Joaquim, not the barn, a real room in the senior staff quarters. And starting today, he's in charge of the care of of Thunder." Vargas, still processing everything he'd just witnessed, simply nodded, again and again, like a man who finally understood the magnitude of what he had been standing next to without ever seeing it. The days that followed on the Santa Helena ranch were marked by a transformation that was quiet but unmistakable. Joaquim, the old man everyone had laughed at, spent his mornings in the isolated corral with Thunder, caring for him with a dedication that no one on the ranch had ever seen before. He hummed softly while he groomed the horse's coat. He told old stories while he braided the dark mane, and slowly, day by day, the animal that had thrown 3 men and terrorized the stable hands became as calm as still water in the presence of the old man. The younger ranch hands, who had mocked him so freely on that first morning, began to drift toward him with something new on their faces. Not pity, not embarrassment, but genuine curiosity. The same young man who had shouted the most cutting joke about a walking stick was the first to walk over and ask to be forgiven. "Mr. Joaquim, I'm sorry for what I said that day. I had no idea who you were." Joaquim, without a trace of bitterness in his voice, simply smiled. "Son, I was young and foolish once too. The important thing is that you recognize the mistake. Now come here. Let me show you how to brush out his mane without leaving a single tangle." And so, little by little, the old man who nobody had wanted to hire became the most respected figure on the entire ranch. The younger hands began seeking him out for advice, not just about Thunder, but about all the horses. How to read an animal's body before it acted. How to approach something wild without making it feel cornered. How to earn trust rather than demand it. These things sounded simple, but they changed everything about how those men worked. Then one night, a fierce storm swept in across the region with almost no warning. Real thunder split the sky. Lightning painted the horizon white over and over again. The wind came in so hard that it tore down part of the fence around the main corral, the one that held the most valuable horses on the property, Thunder among them. The animals, terrified by the sound and the chaos, began throwing themselves against the weakened fencing, desperate to find a way out through any gap they could reach. Vargas came running to the main house, shouting for help, but the rain was coming down so hard it turned the yard into mud that swallowed every step. Mr. Augusto ran out in his robe, his face white, watching the animals he'd spent years and a fortune building beginning to scatter toward the open road, where darkness and speeding vehicles made every second a life or death moment. It was Joaquim who arrived first. Not the youngest man on the ranch, not the strongest, the oldest. His legs hurt. His breath came hard in the cold, wet air. But he ran through the mud with the focus of a man who has already decided that nothing is going to stop him tonight. He reached the edge of the broken fence, soaked through to the bone, and called out into the storm. Not shouting into the confusion, but calling with a voice that carried a different kind of force entirely. "Thunder! Thunder, come here, boy. Come to me." In the middle of that chaos, horses screaming, lightning striking, ranch hands stumbling and shouting without effect, it was that old, quiet voice that cut through everything like a blade. Thunder, who had been seconds from jumping through the gap in the fence, stopped mid-motion. His head turned, and he ran, not toward the road, not toward the dark, but back toward Joaquim, back toward the only voice he had ever truly known as home. The old man wrapped his arms around the horse's soaked neck and spoke low words into the animal's ear that no one else could hear above the wind. But whatever those words were, they worked. Thunder grew still, and watching their leader calm, the other horses began to settle too, one by one following his example, drawn back from the edge of panic by something none of them could explain. With the animals calmer and the ranch hands finally able to move efficiently, the fence was reinforced with boards and rope before any horse escaped. When the storm finally passed and left the sky washed clean and full of stars, Mr. Augusto found Joaquim sitting in the mud, leaning against Thunder's side, completely exhausted, shivering, but with a quiet, steady satisfaction on his face that the night could not touch. "Mr." Augusto walked over and crouched down beside him, paying no attention to the mud ruining his clothes. "You just saved half of everything this ranch is worth, Joaquim." "I only did what I always do, sir. Took care of what needed to be taken care of." From that night forward, nobody on the Santa Helena ranch looked at the old man the way they had on that first morning. He was called Mr. Joaquim now, by every single person, from Vargas to the youngest hand on the property. Even Mr. Wow. Augusto began to come to him before making important decisions about the herd, not because he had to, because he understood, finally, that the depth of what this man knew could not be found in any document or certificate. The months passed. The bond between Joaquim and Thunder only deepened. The horse that had once been seen purely as a symbol of status and wealth, a number on a ledger, a trophy, began to be treated the way he should always have been, as a living creature, sensitive and loyal, capable of love when love was given first. On a quiet afternoon, almost a full year after Joaquim's arrival, Mr. Augusto called him to the porch of the main house for a conversation. "Joaquim, I have a proposal for you. I want you to officially take on the management of our entire horse operation, your own house here on the property, a proper salary, and complete authority to teach the rest of the staff the way you've been doing things since you got here." Joaquim was quiet for a long time, his eyes bright with something he was trying not to show. "Mr. Augusto, I came here asking for nothing more than a chance, a plate of food, a dry place to sleep. I never imagined I would find—" He stopped. He looked out toward the corral, where Thunder was grazing calmly in the afternoon sun, unhurried and at peace. A family. And that is how the story of a tired old man, ridiculed at a gate on a dusty morning, dismissed before he even had a chance to speak, became the most remembered and most respected story in the history of the Santa Helena Ranch. Because in the end, the value of a person was never found in the clothes they wore, or the age they carried, or the speed of their walk down a long road. It was found in the capacity to love without conditions, to care without expecting anything in return, to keep a promise made long ago, even when life has taken everything else away. Years later, when people asked Mr. Augusto what the single best investment he ever made on that ranch had been, he always answered the same way with a slow and certain smile. It wasn't Emperor, It was the morning I decided not to close the gate on a tired old man who only asked for a chance. There is a kind of knowledge that cannot be bought, cannot be inherited, and cannot be rushed into existence by money or ambition. It grows slowly, in the dark and the cold and the small hours before dawn, in the places where nobody is watching and there is no applause. It grows in the hands that keep working when the work stops being easy. It lives in the heart that keeps showing up, even when showing up costs everything. Joaquim carried that knowledge in the calluses on his palms, in the steadiness of his voice, in the unhurried patience of his every step. He had learned it not in any school or seminar, but in the long years of caring for animals that couldn't speak, creatures that could only feel, and that taught him, slowly and without words, that the most powerful language in the world is the one spoken through consistent, quiet presence. The Santa Helena Ranch was never quite the same after he arrived. Not because the fences got newer, or the herd got larger, or the prize money from shows got bigger. It changed because the people on it changed. They learned to slow down, to watch before they acted, to listen before they spoke, to earn what they had instead of simply demanding it. And Thunder, the horse the whole world called emperor, the animal that had thrown men and broken fences and earned a reputation for untamable fury, went on to become something that nobody had ever expected him to be. Not a trophy, not a status symbol, not a number on a contract. He became a teacher. Because every time a young ranch hand watched the way that old man approached him, quiet, steady, unafraid, they learned something they couldn't have been taught any other way. Some lessons only arrive in the form of a tired old man at a gate, asking for nothing more than a chance. And if this story touched something in you today, if it reminded you that real worth is quiet and patient and doesn't always arrive the way you expect, then leave a like, drop a comment telling us what you felt, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because there are more coming, and some of them will reach even deeper than this one.